I'd been with Julian for 6 years, but he never once mentioned marrying me. Until that day, when Julian's phone rang while he was shading and he asked me to answer it for him. It was a number without any remarks. When I picked up, a girl's voice with a sob came through. "Julian, I miss you so much right now." I turned on the speakerphone with a cold expression. The woman's distressed voice on the phone seemed to possess Julian and drive him crazy. The woman on the phone was his first lot and also his elder brother's fee and key. Julie, and didn't give any explanation. He grabbed the car keys and left the house. Later, I packed my things and left without saying goodbye. But I never expected that Julian would look for me like a madman. As night fell and the lights of the city came on, I gently pushed away Julian, who was kissing my neck, and grumbled discontentedly, "Your beard is pricking me. It hurts so much." This time Julian had been on a business trip for half a month, and he was really pent up. During the 3 days he was resting at home, I could barely get out of bed. My body really couldn't take it anymore. "Is it just pain?" Julian smiled and pinched my cheek, then helped me shave. "Okay." I hummed in agreement. When I was halfway through shaving his beard, Julian's phone rang. He said it was probably one of his childhood friends calling to ask him out for a drink and asked me to answer for him. I wiped my hands clean and went out to pick up the phone. The screen showed a number without any remarks. I clicked to answer it. "Julianne, I miss you so much right now." The woman's voice was filled with sobs. Just by listening to the voice, one could tell that the person speaking sounded pitiful and aggrieved. Hearing this voice that I was not unfamiliar with, my heart jolted violently, and I almost dropped the phone in my hand. I expressionlessly turned on the speakerphone of the phone and took it to Julian's side. The woman's intermittent sobs and cries came to the phone. Julian's hand that was shaving stopped for a moment. I clicked to hang up the call. Watching him turn on the faucet and wash his face with cold water, I couldn't help asking, "Are you going to find her?" Julian didn't answer me. He didn't even have time to dry his face. He snatched the phone from my hand, grabbed the car keys, and rushed out the door in a hurry. I stood there in a daze. Only later did I realize that I raised my hand to touch my right shoulder, which was stinging with pain. Just now, when Julian took the phone, he accidentally pushed me, and my shoulder hit the door frame. I knew who was calling Julian. It was Daphne, a woman who almost became his sister-in-law. Daphne and Julian used to date in high school. Later, for some unknown reason, Daphne went abroad. When she came back, she had already become Julian's elder brother's girlfriend. However, before Daphne could marry Julian's elder brother died in a plane crash. In fact, I've always known that Julian has never been able to let go of Daphne in his heart. Every time he came back from a business trip, he would bring 2 gifts. On every festival, he would also send blessings to Daphne. I also knew that the little dog Daphne raced was named Cio, which was a birthday gift Julian gave her. I just didn't know how many times they had met behind my back and what they had done. At around 10 o'clock, my phone vibrated a few times. My best friend Mia sent me a series of messages. "Holy shit, is your Julian cheating on you? He actually hugged a woman in the bar."
Wait.
The woman Julian hugged is Daphne. That's cumbag. Then there were a few photos. The bar was dimly lit, so the photos were naturally not very clear. But I could still recognize the faces of Julian and Daphne in the photos. Julian was holding Daphne, and Daphne seemed to be drunk, looking at him with misty and charming eyes. "Mia, what's going on between these two? Do you want to come over and catch them in the act?" "Honey," I replied, "forget it. I'm too lazy to go." I took a bottle of wine and sat outside on the balcony. Later, when I was scrolling through my WeChat moments, I saw a status update from Daphne. "You're the only one in the world who treats me the best." The picture attached was a very blurry back view. But having been together for 6 years, even though it was blurry, how could I not recognize Julian's back? I remembered the year Julian's elder brother passed away. At that time, it was the 2nd year of my relationship with Julian. After the funeral, Julian invited some of his childhood friends to dinner as a way to thank them for their help at his elder brother's funeral. Daphne and I were also there. It was at that time that Daphne took the initiative to add me on WeChat. Later, I met her a few times, but we didn't have a deep friendship. And every time I met Daphne, Julian was also there. I waited in the living room all night, but Julian didn't come back. Watching the sky gradually turn pale with the first light of dawn, I let out a long sigh, got up to wash my face and change my clothes, and then took out the suitcase and started packing my things. Julian and I got together in our junior year of college. I was the one who chased him. At that time, there were many girls who were chasing him, but Julian chose me. Later, I asked him why, and he said it was because I was different from the other girls. I asked him where I was different, but he just smiled and didn't say anything. Later, we graduated, and Julian joined his family's company. At that time, because of the death of his elder brother, and Julian's father was a man who didn't care about business matters and only knew how to immerse himself in the company of women, Julian had a really tough time in the company. I stayed by his side through thick and thin. The first order Julian got after taking over the company was secured by me. I drank so much that I almost got gastric bleeding. Later, I became Julian's right-hand man. But then more and more rumors started to spread in the company. Some people started to spread rumors privately, saying that Julian had no ability and that he got his projects to her by improper means. At first, we didn't care about it. But as these rumors spread more and more, Julian hesitated to speak to me more and more often. I knew in my heart that it was time for me to leave the company. Later, I opened my own small studio. I don't know if it was out of guilt or some other feeling, but when I opened the studio, Julian paid half of the money for it. But I didn't take his money for nothing. I transferred a portion of the studio's profits to him quarterly according to the agreed ratio. I moved out of Julian's apartment. For 3 whole days, he didn't contact me even once. Until Friday when I went to meet a client. I happened to run into Daphne and Julian at the entrance of the clubhouse. I frowned. I was about to ignore the two of them, but Julian called out to me, "Isabella, what's the matter?" I turned around and just happened to see Daphne, almost possessive lie, tightly grabbing Julian's arm. She said in a low voice, a little nervously, "Let's go in quickly." Julian. Then she looked at me warily and said, "Miss Isabella must have something to do. Let's not bother her." I nodded and looked at Daphne with a half-smile. "Yeah, I still have to meet a client later. I'm not as leisurely as the two of you." Daphne bit her lips lightly, and her face looked a bit unpleasant. After I finished speaking, I didn't look at them anymore and walked into the clubhouse with elegant steps. However, the client I was supposed to meet tonight couldn't make it because of a sudden family matter. I waited in the private room for almost half an hour before the other party called me apologetically to explain. I had been trying to win over this client for more than half a month, and the other party finally agreed to meet and talk. Since the other party stood me up tonight, most likely this cooperation had already found another partner and rejected me. I went out a soft sigh, picked up the wine on the table and drank it all in one gulp, then got up and left. But after I left the private room, I ran into Daphne again in the restroom. She was applying lipstick in front of the mirror. When she saw me, a look of nervousness and embarrassment flashed across her face involuntarily. "Mrs. Isabella, I heard that you opened your own studio. You're really amazing." Daphne finished applying her lipstick, pursed her red lips, and smiled. "Unlike me, I can't do anything well, Daphne." Just as Daphne finished speaking, Julian came looking for her. Standing outside the ladies' restroom, he looked at the two of us with a complicated expression. But when he looked at Daphne, his expressions often involuntarily. The tenderness on Julian's face made me feel a bit dazed. As far as I could remember, he had never shown me such a tender expression. Even in bed, he was cold and dominant. After the passion subsided, there might be a moment or two of tenderness and flirting. But tenderness. He had never shown it to me. "Julian." Daphne walked out and naturally and affectionately hooked her arm through Julian's. I was just about to say that for such a capable, strong woman like Mrs. Isabella, I wonder what kind of boyfriend she will find in the future. I understood the implication in her words. She was deliberately trying to disgust me. I said, "Ms. Daphne is really meddling too much." However, even if I were to find a boyfriend in the future, I would definitely find a single man. I won't be like someone who likes to steal other people's boyfriends. Moreover, a man who can be stolen by another woman can't be a good catch. Isabella, my words annoyed Julian, and his face darkened a bit. I rolled my eyes, ignored the two of them, and turned around to leave. But I didn't expect that as soon as I got back to my rented apartment, within 10 minutes, Julian came looking for me. He knew I lived here, and I didn't find it strange. I didn't let him in. I stood inside the door, and he stood outside. What are you doing here? Are you angry? Julian raised his eyebrows and looked at me. Isabella, I always thought you were a qualified bed partner. I didn't expect you to be so easily angered. Bad partner? A look of astonishment flashed across my face, followed by anger. I had been with him for 6 years, and in the end, I only got these 2 words in return. Julian reached out his hand to touch my face. Without thinking, I slapped his hand away and gave him a resounding slap in the face. Get out. I used a lot of force. And several red marks immediately appeared on Julian's face. That instead of being angry, he laughed. Are you this angry? You haven't suffered any losses by being with me all these years. Have you? Don't you think I contributed to the 7-figure deposit in your bank card? Isabella, it's just a game between consenting adults. You didn't really take it seriously. Did you? A game? I closed my eyes, and the anger in my heart gradually turned into nausea. Look, Isabella, this is the man you've loved for 6 years. In the end, you're just a dispensable bed partner in his heart. How sad and how unworthy. But it doesn't matter. It's better to see him clearly earlier. Yes, it's just a game. I looked at him coldly. So now can General Manager Julian get lost? Why should I leave? Julian was about to come closer. Just as I was about to speak, out of the corner of my eye, I suddenly saw the elevator door open. And a figure walked out. It was Daphne. Isabella. I didn't expect this crazy Daphne to suddenly rush over and slap me, and then she shouted hysterically. You have no shame. Isabella, Julian is my boyfriend now. I slapped her back with my backhand. Still feeling angry. I kicked Julian in the stomach. You 2 crazy people, get out of here. I turned around to close the door. But Daphne wouldn't let me. She stared at me with bloodshot eyes. Julian has never really loved you, Isabella. What do you think you are? You know very well how you got that project from Nathaniel's company back then. I looked up at Julian. Memories of that year flashed through my mind. The corner of my mouth twitched, and I looked at him sarcastically. So you've always thought that I slept with Nathaniel back then. That Nathaniel did indeed imply that kind of intention to me. So when he invited me to the hotel to sign the contract that day, I called Nathaniel's wife in advance. Everyone in the circle knew that Nathaniel was notoriously afraid of his wife. So, even though he was reluctant that day, Nathaniel still signed the contract. Julian's face suddenly looked a bit unnatural. The sarcasm on my face grew stronger. Since you think I'm no longer clean, why have you kept me by your side all these years? Oh, I see. I laughed twice, but my hands hanging by my sides were clenched tightly. Probably at that time, you hadn't firmly established your position in the company yet, and he still needed my help with many things. Right? I turned my gaze to Daphne. So now that you've secured that position, you think your first love is better, right? I gave the 2 of them the middle finger. You 2 really are a perfect match. What makes you think you're so high and mighty? Daphne looked at me with a look of disdain. You're just a slut who's been played around with. Do you really think Julianne will marry you? Julianne just stood there, watching Daphne insult me, with no intention of stopping her at all. We're all women, Miss Daphne. Didn't your mother teach you how to respect others since you were a child? I grabbed Daphne's loose hair and pushed her hard, making her fall to the ground. What are you doing? Julianne also pushed me, and my back hit the wall heavily, causing a dull pain. What are you people doing? 2 police officers from the police station came up the stairs and said irritably, someone called the police saying that you're disturbing the neighbors late at night. All of you go to the police station. I was already in a bad mood because I didn't get to meet the client and didn't close the deal tonight. Who knew that when I got home, I ran into these 2 crazy people, Julian and Daphne. I had so much pent-up anger that I didn't know where to release it. Anyway, There were surveillance cameras in the corridor. The police officers checked the surveillance footage and understood everything clearly. But they still gave the three of us a lecture, saying that we should handle our personal affairs properly and not disturb the neighbors late at night. When we came out of the police station, I don't know what Julian said to Daphne. Daphne gave me a cold glance and reluctantly got into the car first. Julian walked towards me. He looked at me with a complicated expression. "Did you really not sleep with Nathaniel back then?" I said I didn't. "But don't you believe me?" Seeing Daphne in the car stretching her neck to look this way, I deliberately took a step closer to Julian and gently poked his chest with my finger. "You said at my doorstep earlier that these 6 years between us were just a game. Julian, then I wish you and your former sister-in-law to be in love forever and be tied together for the rest of your lives." After saying that, I pushed him hard and turned around to get into a taxi. And when Julian got back into the car, his face had an indescribable, deep expression. When he started the car, he suddenly asked Daphne, "Did you really see Isabella go to a hotel to open a room with Nathaniel back then?" I gave myself 2 days off and slept soundly at home. After waking up, I cooked some instant noodles and ate them while watching variety shows. But this rare leisurely time didn't last long before it was interrupted by a call from my mother, Isabella. "Do you have time to come back for a meal tomorrow? Mom has some good news to tell you." I didn't ask her what the good news was. I just hummed and agreed. But I didn't expect that when I went back the next day, Ethan was also at home. Ethan is my mother's son from her second marriage. However, not long after the child was born, my stepfather abandoned us and had an affair. When I was a child, because I was a girl, my grandparents didn't like me. They even openly found a mistress for my father. My mother was so angry that she got a divorce. But unexpectedly, the man in her second marriage was even more unreliable than my father. Over the years, she has raised me and Ethan on her own. I know how hard it has been for her. At the dining table, my mother kept putting food on my plate, while Ethan just buried his head in his food without saying a word. My mother peeled a braised prawn for me and suddenly said, "Isabella, your younger brother is getting married at the end of the year." My hand that was picking up food stopped. I already vaguely guessed what she was going to say next. But the girl's family said that we need to buy a house. My mother put the peeled prawn into my bowl. "Your brother and I have already picked out a house. It's not expensive, just 3 million yuan. If you think it's good, then buy it," I said. My mother immediately smiled. "Mom knew you were a good child. Your younger brother has 100,000 yuan in his hand. You, as his elder sister, can pay the rest for him." I took a deep breath and put down my chopsticks. "I don't have the money." My mother immediately said, "If you don't have it, you can ask Julian for it. He runs such a big company. 3 million yuan is nothing to him. I've broken up with him, and he already has a new girlfriend now." I paused for a moment and then looked at Ethan, who had been keeping his head down all the time. A person should do things according to their own abilities. You're already 25 years old. You can't rely on others for your whole life. Ethan robbed out of high school before graduating. After loafing around for a while, I found him an apprenticeship as a mechanic. But Ethan thought the salary was too low and quit soon. Over the past few years, I found him 5 or 6 jobs one after another, but he never managed to stay in any of them for long. Each time, he would quit after 4 or 5 months and then go back to loafing around. "I don't need you to lecture me." Ethan slapped his chopsticks on the table, got up and walked out the door, slamming it shut behind him with a bang. "Ethan." My mother stood up and was about to chase after him. After taking 2 steps, she turned around and looked at me. "Rupert Schulfe, Isabella, what are you doing? Do you know how hard it's been for me to raise you 2 siblings since you were little? Why can't you be more understanding of me? Aren't I understanding enough?" I took a gentle breath. "But have you ever considered my feelings? You're asking for 3 million yuan for a house just like that. Mom, your daughter doesn't have that much ability. I'm not an ATM machine. Even if I had the money, I wouldn't give it." I took out a bank card from my bag and put it on the table. "There's 200,000 yuan in this card. As an elder sister, this is all I can do for my younger brother's house. Let him figure out the rest on his own." When I left that house, it was drizzling outside, and I didn't even notice when it started. I walked on the wet sidewalk with an umbrella. What came to my mind was when I was 10 years old. Although my mother has always favored Ethan a bit since we were kids, she has never treated me badly. That year, because we really didn't have the money to pay the tuition fees for me and Ethan, my mother secretly went to sell her blood. It was our neighbor at that time who quietly told me about it. So over the years, no matter how much my mother doted on Ethan or how many ways she found to take money from me for Ethan, I've never said a word of objection. But now I suddenly feel tired. I don't want to be a brother supporter for my whole life. I also want to live the little life I like. After losing 3 orders in a row, I finally realized that someone was playing tricks on me behind my back. Asked a friend for help, and soon found out that it was Daphne who was behind all this. I don't know what conditions she offered to those people, but in the end, those clients all chose to cooperate with Julian Group. So I called a colleague who I had a good relationship with when I worked in Julian Group before. Only then did I learn that Julian, for some unknown reason recently, had stripped several senior executives of their real power. Then he promoted a group of people on his own. Although there were some capable people among those Julian promoted, they were all too young after all. Without enough experience and seniority, it was difficult for them to keep their subordinates in line. My colleague also told me that Julian had replaced his previous secretary with Daphne. I really couldn't understand what these two people were up to. Did they want to force me to beg for mercy by such means? They really are a crazy couple. I immediately found someone to pull some strings and sold my studio. With the savings I had accumulated over the years, I wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of my life. Just as I was thinking about where to spend my retirement, Julian called me. "You sold the studio? Isabella, I just wanted you to admit defeat. And you turned around and sold the studio?" On the phone, Julian roared hoarsely. I held the phone a little farther away and frowned. What the hell does it have to do with you that I sold my studio? At that time, the president's office of Julian Group was like a minefield. Whoever went in would be in bad luck, and even Daphne had been kicked out. Until Julian's childhood friend Daniel came. The atmosphere in the office was cold and filled with smoke. When Daniel went in, Julian was standing in front of the French window smoking a cigarette. He really didn't expect that Isabella would sell the studio so straightforwardly. That was the career she had built up with her own hands. Julian took several puffs of the cigarette and finally threw the cigarette, but into the ashtray viciously. There was a surge of anger in his chest that he couldn't release, and he felt suffocated. "Why are you so angry that she sold her own studio?" Daniel looked at him casually. Seeing that Julian didn't say anything, Daniel frowned. "Julian, Isabella has been with you for 6 years after all. What on earth do you mean? Are you really breaking up with her?" In fact, it wasn't just Daniel. Several of Julian's close childhood friends didn't like Daphne very much. The reason was simple. Back then, Daphne had left for abroad without a word and then got together with Julian's elder brother out of the blue. If Julian's elder brother hadn't had an accident, the two of them would have been married by now. Over the past few years, Daphne had known very well that Julian had a girlfriend, but she still kept pestering Julian. Daniel had personally caught them in intimate postures, looking like lovers, no less than 10 times. Who does she think she is? Julie unpunched the desk irritably. "Daniel, do me a favor. Buy back Isabella's studio in your name. I'll pay whatever the price is." Daniel sneered. "What's the point of buying it back? Don't you know Isabella's personality? Since she's made up her mind, I'm afraid she won't have any more involvement with you. Do you know her that well?" Julian suddenly narrowed his eyes. All right, I'll go and buy it for you." Daniel raised his hands in surrender and left the office grumbling. Julian lit another cigarette. Isabella's bright face flashed through his mind, and the depression in his chest became even more intense. My mother called me several times, but I didn't answer. Later, I don't know how she found out where I was. And she just came to my place directly. My mother glared at me with red eyes. "We won't buy such an expensive house for your brother anymore. It's 8 million yuan. Can you just give 8 million yuan? Isabella, if there's no house, your brother won't be able to get married." In the end, my mother stuck out her neck stubbornly. "If you don't give me the money today, I won't leave." I'll go downstairs in the community and shout that you're ungrateful and heartless." I looked at her indifferently and took a sip of the warm water on the table. My mother felt a bit guilty under my gaze. She pursed her lips and softened her tone, "Isabella, I really have no other choice. Your brother has to get married after all." I said, "I have the obligation to support you, but I won't be a brother supporter endlessly." I went to the bedroom and took out another bank card for her. "This card was open with your ID information. I've seen some money in it over the years. As long as you don't gamble or break the law, the money in the card is enough for you to live on for the rest of your life." My mother happily took the bank card. But before she left, she looked at me suspiciously again. "Isabella, you am going to leave here. Where? Where are you going?" I glanced at her. "I don't know yet, but I probably won't come back." I randomly chose a city in the south. Since there was no direct flight, I took a high-speed train. Transferred several times along the way, taking turns between high-speed trains and regular trains. Since I wasn't in a hurry, I slowly enjoyed the scenery along the way, and I felt more relaxed than ever both physically and mentally. This small southern city's tourism industry was still developing, so there weren't many tourists. I hired a tour guide. After playing for a few days, I rented a small house in the town and planned to stay here for a while. The town was an ancient one, with not many people, and the pace of life was slow. The house I rented was next to a large sea of flowers. When I opened the window, I could see the vast, sparkling lake. Sitting by the window and watching the sunset every day became my favorite thing to do. Until about half a month later, I received a video. The video was sent to me by my best friend Mia. The background of the video was in Julian's ancestral house. Julian's parents divorced when he was very young. His father indulged in wine and women and led a dissolute life. Julian and his elder brother were raised and educated by the old lady of the Julian family since they were children. Today was the 80th birthday of the old lady of the Julian family. For some reason, Daphne showed up uninvited and even went there as Julian's girlfriend. Julian's foster parent was so angry that he slapped her on the spot. The family education of the Julian family was very strict, and Julian's foster parent couldn't tolerate any impropriety. Daphne had been engaged to Julian's elder brother back then. Now she had become Julian's girlfriend, and Julian's foster parent naturally wouldn't agree. In the video, after Daphne was slapped by Julian's foster parent also furiously rebuked her, not giving Daphne any face at all in front of so many guests. At the end of the video, I even heard Julian's foster parent ask Julian why Isabella didn't come. Mia sent me a few more messages, basically saying that Daffy wanted to force Julie and to admit that she was his girlfriend by taking the opportunity of Julian's foster parents' 80th birthday without first seeking approval. But she didn't expect that Julian's foster parent would be so unforgiving. I casually replied a few words. In the evening, a strange number called my phone. Before leaving that city, I had already blocked all of Julian's contact information. At this moment, looking at the strange phone number on the phone screen, I had a hunch that this was Julian's call. So I didn't answer. I took a can of beer from the refrigerator, sat down beside it, and quietly waited for the call to hang up automatically. I lived in the ancient town for 3 months. Just as I was packing my things and leaving the ancient town to go to the next destination, Julian arrived. At that time, I was having rice noodles at the breakfast shop across the street while holding my suitcase. When I looked up, I saw Julian in a suit. The back of him. In 3 months' time, it didn't seem like a difficult thing for him to find this place. I swallowed a mouthful of rice noodles in a hurry. The moment Julian entered the house across the street, I carried my suitcase to the counter and asked the boss to send me to the high-speed railway station. There was a delivery van parked outside the door of the shop. I paid 200 yuan, and the landlady helpfully helped me load the suitcase onto the van. Almost the moment the van started, I saw Julian come out of the guest house across the street, his face looking a bit livid. The owner of the guest house was also the landlord of the house I had rented before. Julian's gaze turned towards the van. I retracted my sight from the rearview mirror and opened my phone to chat with Mia. That's when I learned that Julian had already broken up with Daphne. In fact, ever since Julian said the words bed partner that night, I understood. Over the years, when Julian was with me, I didn't know if he liked me or not. But to him, I still had many uses. For example, I could help him with business matters. And I could also warm his bed in my spare time. More importantly, with me standing in the way, who would suspect the relationship between him and Daphne? Even Julian's foster parent had been kept in the dark for so many years. Hadn't he? I loved such a man for 6 years. But now I'm very glad that I'm free. The landlady who was driving smiled and asked me where I planned to go next. Actually, I hadn't decided yet. Anyway, I would just buy a high-speed railway ticket on the spot, travel while looking around, stay for a few months when I encountered a suitable place, and then continue on to the next trip. Julian had changed completely. He became more and more resolute and efficient, and also more taciturn. He personally investigated the matter between Isabella and Nathaniel back then. Only then did he know that when Isabella signed the contract with Nathaniel. Although Nathaniel had hinted at wanting to have a relationship with her, on the day of signing, Isabella secretly called Nathaniel's wife. So Nathaniel didn't succeed. But at that time, Daphne had clearly sworn to him that Isabella had slept with Nathaniel, and even showed him photos of Isabella and Nathaniel entering the same hotel room together. What did he feel at that time? He was full of anger at being betrayed, and also a sense of powerlessness. So during that period, he gave Isabella the cold shoulder. Even in bed, he was very rough. Every time, he wouldn't stop until he had exhausted her. When exactly did he realize that he had truly fallen in love with Isabella? Julian couldn't quite remember. Perhaps he had fallen in love with her a long time ago, but he just refused to face his true feelings. Julian also gradually understood that his feelings for Daphne were just the persistence of unrequited love from his youth. Perhaps from the moment Daphne became his brother's girlfriend. It was destined that there would be no possibility between him and Daphne in this life. The one he loved in his heart was Isabella. It was just a pity that he realized it too late. In a private room of a certain clubhouse, Julian didn't invite anyone else, just called Daniel. But who would have thought that when they were halfway through drinking, Daphne came? Although Julian had broken up with her, how could Daphne be willing to accept it? Back then, she was with Julian's elder brother just because she knew that in the future, he would be the person in charge of the Julian family's company. She, Daphne, either wouldn't get married at all, and if she did, of course, she had to marry an outstanding person. Who would have thought that Julian's elder brother would have such a short life? But fortunately, there was Julian as a backup. She had waited for so many years and lured him for so many years. Now Julian wanted to break up just like that. How could that be possible? What are you doing here? Before Daphne could speak, Julian looked at her coldly. I remember I made it very clear to Ing that we should have nothing to do with each other from now on. Julian. Daphne was very good at playing the weak and innocent role. She looked at Julian with a pitiful expression on her face. Did I do something wrong? No, you're not wrong. It's me. As Julian spoke, he picked up the wine glass on the table and took a big gulp. He closed his eyes. I was really blind and lost Isabella. Daphne was taken aback, and her lips were almost bitten until they bled. All right, Julian. You've had too much to drink. Seeing the atmosphere turn stiff, Daniel quickly came over to smooth things over. He said to Daphne, Daphne, you'd better go back first. We can talk about it in a few days. Daphne looked at Julian and laughed reluctantly. Daniel sighed and asked, You've been having people look for her for so long, and there's still no news of Isabella? Julian leaned his whole body against the sofa, wiped his face with his hand, and his voice was filled with endless bitterness. This time, she's determined to hide. Isabella was just angry. When her anger subsides, she'll come back. Even as she comes back, what does it have to do with you? Daniel said irritably. Wasn't it you who wronged her first? What are you pretending to be so decadent for here? I want to go find her. Julian suddenly sat up straight and looked at Daniel without blinking. Since I lost Isabella, then I'll go and find her myself. 2 years later, on the plate-lined street in a foreign country, 4-year-old James was throwing a tantrum and refused to walk. He insisted that I buy him a cake. No way. I pinched his chubby cheeks. Your dad said that if I buy you any more sweets, he'll deduct my salary. The little guy looked up at me pitifully and asked in a babyish voice, "Can't we do it secretly?" Thinking of the little guy's father's icy face, I hardened my heart. Now, let's go home quickly. James was whining. Just as I was about to hold his hand and continue walking, I suddenly stopped in my tracks. "Julian?" I was taken aback and thought I was seeing things. Because he looked much thinner, and his face didn't look very good either, as if he hadn't had a good rest for a long time. "Isabella, I finally found you." Julian rushed over and hugged me tightly. The force was so great that I could hardly breathe. He was still muttering, "I thought I would never see you again in my life. Isabella, you're so heartless. Why didn't you even give me a chance? Who are you?" "Don't bully my Isabella," that a James slapped Julian with his two chubby hands. "Let go of her quickly." I pushed Julian away with all my strength. "Who is he?" Julian's gaze landed on James. And then he looked at me. "Isabella, who is he?" "My son." I glanced at him and pulled James to leave. But Julian grabbed my hand fiercely, like a madman. "You have a child with another man?" He shouted this sentence so loudly that my ears were almost deafened. But after shouting, he realized that James looked at least 4 or 5 years old, and I had only been away for 2 years. How could I possibly have given birth to a child this old? James wasn't my biological child, of course. A year ago, when I was traveling abroad, I happened to find the lost little James. He was a mixed-race child. His father had the same nationality as me. And as for his mother, she had died during childbirth. At that time, the little guy was so scared that he only wanted me and kept holding me tightly without letting go. Later, James' father used some connections. And somehow I became the nanny of this little kid with an annual salary of 1 million. The air abroad is nice and the environment is also good. The key is that this job has a high salary and is quite leisurely. Anyway, there's no one in China that I miss anymore. It's quite nice to stay here and take care of little James. Isabella, I've been looking for you all this time. Julian looked at me with red eyes. Would you like to go back with me? No. I frowned and looked at him. What would I go back with you for? To continue being your bed partner. I'm not that cheap. No, Julian said urgently. I had a foul mouth back then. I made you sad, Isabella. This time when we go back, we'll get married. I'll marry you. Are you okay? I was so angry that I coughed twice. Then I heard James blink his eyes and chime in, if you're okay, eat Lily you may. Isabella, come back with me. Julian pestered me and wouldn't let me and James leave. I have nothing to do with Daphne anymore, and I won't see her again in the future. Isabella, can you trust me? What are you doing? A black car stopped and Mr. Lucas got out of the car and walked towards us. He is 5 years older than me. It is said that he grew up abroad since he was a child and took over the family business in his 20s, with an iron-fisted approach. Lucas is handsome, elegant, scheming, and deep, which is completely different from Julian. Daddy. James immediately dashed over and shouted at his father. Someone is trying to steal your wife from you. Me? This naughty kid. Who are you? Julian looked at Lucas in a suit and instinctively tried to come over and grab my hand, but I dodged it. Mrs. Isabella is my son's teacher. Lucas spoke Chinese with a clear and standard pronunciation. He looked at Julian inferently. Sir, if you continue to pester, don't blame me for being rude. As soon as Lucas finished speaking, four bodyguards in suits and sunglasses behind him took 2 steps forward in unison. Julian suddenly frowned. With the bodyguards blocking him, he had no choice but to watch as I got into the car with Lucas and his son. Julian was like a piece of adhesive plaster. As soon as I went out, he would stick to me, repeating the same few words, asking me to go back to China with him, and saying that he would marry me and give me a grand wedding. Isabella, can you give me another chance? Outside the villa, Julian blocked me and tried to grab my hand several times. I felt a rush of anger. Is it interesting? Julian? I looked at him inferently. 2 years have passed, and you're still dwelling on such meaningless things? I was with you for 6 years. If you really wanted to marry me, you would have done it long, Adele, instead of waiting until you've hurt me beyond repair to make peace. Julian stared at me blankly. His lips moved a few times, but he couldn't say anything. Suddenly, a hand was placed on my shoulder. Lucas put his arm around me and took a few steps to the side. His eyes casually swept past Julian. And he asked me, "Do you need to call the police?" "Forget it," I said. "I'm going to the supermarket." "Would Mr. Lucas like to accompany me?" "With pleasure." After he finished speaking, he took his hand off my shoulder. Julian was angry and tried to follow, but he was blocked by bodyguards who came from nowhere. And in a corner where I couldn't see, 2 bodyguards gave him a good beating. There is a large supermarket nearby. After walking for a few minutes, I turned my head and thanked Lucas. There was no expression on his face. "You're Jane's teacher. I just don't want Mrs. Abella's personal affairs to affect your job."
TSK this guy.
But he's always been like this, cold and distant, and occasionally unfeeling. I'm used to it. After entering the supermarket, I took a small cart and didn't notice the deep gaze with which Lucas looked at my back behind me. After that day, I didn't see Julian again. I don't know if he went back to China, but I don't care about that either. During the day, after James goes to kindergarten, I start learning a foreign language at home by myself. In the evening, when the young master comes back from school, I take care of his eating, drinking, and daily needs. James was abused by his previous nanny, so he resisted the new nannies his father found. On the other hand, am soft-hearted and can't stand seeing such a cute little kid crying, so I agreed to stay and take care of him. But the little kid's father has a conscience and pays me very well. In the evening, after I put James to sleep, I went downstairs to drink some water. Unexpectedly, I saw Lucas sitting in the living room drinking. He asked me if I wanted a glass. The wines at home were all very precious. I heard from the Filipino maid who works here before that Mr. Lucas likes to collect famous wines, and any bottle of wine here starts at a price of 1 million. I couldn't resist the temptation. Then I'll accept it with gratitude. I poured myself a glass. The wine was a light red color, and it had a sweet fragrance of mixed flowers and fruits when I drank it. But after a few seconds, the spices began to spread in my mouth. "That man who pestered you." Lucas gently shook the liquid in his wine glass and asked me in an offhand tone, "Is he your ex-boyfriend?" "Non facta." After a pause I said, "At most, he can be considered a former sex partner." Seeing a rare look of surprise on his face, I couldn't help but say, "I was with him for 6 years and accompanied him through his most difficult times." "Do you know how he described me?" Seeing that Lucas didn't say anything, I simply finished the wine in the glass in one gulp and poured myself another glass. "The bed partner." I smiled, but my eyes were a little sore. "The person he has always loved in his heart is his elder brother's fiancé." Isn't that ridiculous? An emotion I couldn't understand flashed across Lucas' face. This wine has a strong after effect. After I drank 2 glasses, I started chatting nonstop and babbled a lot to Lucas. As for what I said, I can't even remember it myself. The only vague memory later was probably that Lucas sighed and carried me up to the 2nd floor. Half a month later, I went back to China because my mother had a car accident and my half-brother Ethan, who has the same mother but a different father, disappeared without a trace. The hospital couldn't get in touch with Ethan, so they had to contact me after some twists and turns. My mother's car accident was quite serious. The doctor told me that if she couldn't wake up, there was a high probability that she would become a vegetable later. I basically spent the first day back in China in the hospital, running up and down several times. Finally, I figured out the cause of my mother's car accident. It turned out that since I left 2 years ago, my mother no longer indulged Ethan as she used to. She only gave Ethan 100,000 yuan out of the 500,000 yuan and saved the rest. Later, Ethan ran away from home and hasn't been found until now. With her daughter gone and her son also gone, my mother's mental state has been getting worse day by day. That day, she went out to buy groceries. When crossing the road, she was in a trance and somehow walked into the traffic flow. The next day I was back in China. Julian appeared in the hospital. He wasn't pestering me like a piece of adhesive plaster anymore. It seemed that he had returned to being the shrewd and calm general manager Julian. Julian didn't say much either. He just stayed with me in the ward all the time. When it was time for a meal, before I even ordered takeout, Julian's secretary had already brought the food. I saw the food in the thermal box, which were all the dishes I used to light. I sighed and looked at him. You really don't have to do this, Julian. I don't blame you anymore. Julian's eyes lit up for a moment, and then he heard me say, we ended things 2 years ago. If you keep doing this, I'll be very troubled. Isabella. Julian closed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was full of bitterness. Is it because of that foreign-looking Chinese? Have you fallen in love with him, Lucas? Then I remembered that I drank too much that night and babbled a lot to him. I didn't know what I said. Later, he carried me back to the bedroom on the second floor to rest, and he went on a business trip early the next morning. Up until I returned to China, Lucas hadn't come back from his business trip. It has nothing to do with him. I let out a sigh and looked at Julian seriously. Even if there were no Lucas, there would still be no possibility between you and me.
Julian.
I won't go back to an old love. Julian still left. Before leaving, he gave me a deep look and didn't say anything. I thought I had made myself clear enough. As long as Julian had any sense of shame, he wouldn't continue to pester me. I've been staying in the hospital taking care of my mother these days. My mother showed no signs of waking up. The doctor told me that medical treatment in this regard is more advanced abroad. If possible, I could try to transfer my mother abroad for treatment. I promised the doctor that I would seriously consider this matter. I stayed with my mother in the hospital during the day and lived in a hotel near the hospital at night. When I was returning to the hotel from the hospital in the evening, I saw Julian at a glance, holding a huge grout of red roses. There were many people coming and going around, and quite a few of them were looking this way. The reason was probably that the bouquet of red roses in Julian's hands was really huge. Isabella. Julian strode towards me. He was about to kneel down on one knee, and the people around also stopped and looked in our direction.
Suddenly, Mom.
A chubby little figure rushed towards me at the speed of light, and both hands hugged my leg at once.
Mom.
I looked down and met James' cute and coquettish little face. The little guy even winked at me. When I looked up again, Lucas was just a few meters away and was walking towards us gracefully. And Julian, holding a large bouquet of roses in his arms, was already frozen on the spot. He didn't know whether to kneel or not. Just at this moment, James also shouted loudly, "Uncle, do you want to propose to my mom?" I felt as if Julian was about to break down. Lucas also came over and affectionately put his hand on my shoulder. I was almost pulled into the hotel by this father and son, one on my left and one on my right. Isabella. Julian's unwilling voice sounded behind me. Are you really never going to forgive me? I didn't look back, but quickened my pace. This was my answer to Julian. Between us, on the night when Daphne called him Wild Drunt, it was already completely over. My mother eventually woke up. I stayed in China and took care of her for 3 months. James also stayed. His father, I don't know how much money he spent, temporarily transferred the little guy to a kindergarten near my mother's house. I always think that Lucas is a bit complicated. He is a 35-year-old man, and he has an air of certainty about everything he does. I vaguely feel that he has some affection for me. However, since Lucas has never explicitly said it, I just play dumb as well. At the moment, for me, feelings are something dispensable. It was my mother who indirectly asked me several times what the relationship between Mr. Lucas and me really was. Every time I just vaguely muddled through it. At the end of the year, I was planning to send James back to spend the spring festival with his father. Unexpectedly, Lucas came. He arrived in the middle of the night and called me, in order not to wake up my mother and James. I tiptoed to open the door. But unexpectedly, as soon as the door opened, I was embraced into a somewhat cold embrace. Lucas hugged me for a few seconds before slowly letting me go. Happy birthday. He took out a box from his pocket. I belatedly realized that it was already past 12 o'clock in the morning, and today was indeed my birthday. Isabella. If the first person to wish you a happy birthday also confesses to you, what are the chances of success? I felt a little torn between laughter and tears. Maybe it accounts for 1%. As for the remaining 99%, it depends on your performance. My 6-year relationship with Julian has already ended completely. After 2 years of reflection, I think I have the courage to start a new relationship. It doesn't matter if there is no result because I still have money. Feelings are just something to spice up a boring life when I'm feeling down. So I can be in a relationship, but I won't give my whole heart anymore. At most. I'll give 50%. Okay. Lucas smiled and walked into the living room with me. He looked at me happily and said, "I will perform well."